Welcome to the show. I am so happy to have Kristen Carmi, special ed advocate, on the show today. Hi, Kristen.
Hi, Gwen. I'm really
How are you?
You know, I'm your biggest fan.
Back at you, lady. Back at you. Obviously, we know each other. But for our lovely audience that doesn't know you, could you tell us about yourself?
Of course. Yeah. So I started working in the world of special education and with individuals with disabilities in way back in 1999 in Maryland. And I had the experience of working with a bunch of different kids, but I really didn't know what direction I was going in. When I moved to Los Angeles, I went ahead and pursued my master's in psychology with an emphasis in behavior analysis, and started working with kids with autism primarily. Did that for decades, and then found myself advocating for first my best friend's child, not really knowing a whole lot, but just out of necessity. And then I met my now husband, who has a son, and he needed some help and he needed an advocate. And I kind of stepped up to the plate and fell in love with the process. Though, full disclosure, advocating for your own child or family members is really emotional and really difficult. So I understand why families have a hard time doing that and why they have to hire an advocate. And to be perfectly honest, I would rather not advocate for family members personally, and usually enlist others to help me, even knowing what I know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you just pull up that we inevitably have a psychological connection and sometimes reactivity that can give us some, like they can serve as blinders, and advocacy needs to be quite neutral in the sense of, I mean, obviously you are really looking out for reasonably someone's rights and protecting those and their needs. But you do it in a certain way. And actually, maybe we can just roll right into that, which is, what exactly is an advocate?
Yeah, an advocate, hold on, let me just hit decline on that call I'm getting.
I'll get to you later.
Yeah, exactly. An advocate is somebody with varied experience. There's no certification for advocacy. You can attend, there are college university programs. There is a great program through COPA, which is they actually have 3 programs called SEAT, Special Education Advocacy Training, and SEAT 2.0 is year long with a practicum. So you get a lot of really good hands-on practice with, investigate or really digging into the rights and then applying your knowledge with real IEPs and such, and with the support of attorneys and advocates with a ton of experience. So anyway, what I'm saying is advocates come in all shapes and sizes. There are parent advocates that just know what they know because they fought the fight with their own kids, and they're there to offer, their support to other families. There are advocates who maybe come to the table with other experience. I've met some advocates who were special ed teachers, who are speech and language therapists. For me, I'm a behavior analyst. So, there are no requirements. I would say, though, if you're looking for an advocate, you want to have somebody who has received some level of formal training. And why would you need an advocate? My gosh. Kind of like what we were saying. Yeah, it's so highly emotional. It's really hard, especially when you're attending your very first IEP and the team is rushing you through, a whole battery of assessment reports, of assessments, the speaking in acronyms, glossing over scaled scores and this and that. And you're just going, gosh, my kid's 3. I don't know what you're talking about. I just want what's right for my child. And so it's nice to have somebody who, one, speaks the language, knows your parental and child rights, and can kind of fill in the blank with technical knowledge and decipher what they're talking about, but also can take a step back from the really big emotions and ask questions. Ask questions to the team, slow them down, gather information so that the parents then can make informed choices. I think, I always explain to my parents, having an advocate, while it can be expensive, especially in Los Angeles, California, where everything is expensive, is kind of like an insurance policy. When you show up to your IEP with an advocate, and the advocate is telling you it is your right to audio record, and you should, because it's going at a breakneck pace and you have no idea what's going on. You want to have the opportunity to go home, re-listen to the recording, look through the documents, make corrections, ask questions, come back to the table maybe. Nobody needs to pressure you to sign a document that day. And so an advocate can kind of hold your hand through that process and say, it's okay if you don't understand this. We can get more information here. The IEP teams are notoriously denying requests, saying they can't do certain things. You have to sign the IEP within 3 days or 10 days or 30 days. These are arbitrary rules that actually aren't rules at all based on federal law. They've just sort of decided within their districts what they need parents to do. And of course, parents are going to trust what they say and feel that pressure. So anyway, it's nice to be able to just kind of alleviate some of those concerns and worries and help the parents through this process. And to be honest, my goal is to empower the parents to take over and advocate for their child. Some parents want me to attend every single IEP until their kid graduates, and that's fine. It's a personal choice. But a lot of times parents learn, how to engage in these meetings and really feel empowered and take over that process themselves so that they need me less, which is really the goal.
Yeah. I mean, some of the things that you said, they really resonate, I think, in the work even that I do. One is just this idea of the reduction of overwhelm. The process of an IEP can be actually quite stressful on parents and families. I know as I support teens, that are transitioning to their adult life, they are expected and really people want them to be at the IEP. And that in and of itself can be quite overwhelming because sometimes that IEP isn't framed in a way that's strengths-based, and it's just a lot of what's not working. And so many of my teens don't want to go to IEPs because they're like, it's just really a meeting for me to find out what's wrong with me. Right. And there's lots of workarounds for that. But I mean, just that in and of itself, for parents that being overwhelmed. And really, if the IEP process is truly about informed choice, meaning I have the information that I need, good, bad, and ugly, and great, to make choices based on what's best for my child and our family. And that's really important because you're right. That process does need to get slowed down.
Yeah. We
do need to understand, all the pieces of what's being presented. And, people even in my field in psychology, they struggle with T-scores, standard scores, scaled scores, norm distribution. This is something, that we went to school for a long time. And, how does that even make sense? How does that relate really practically and functionally for my kiddo? It's so great, but I really love this. The other pieces that I picked up too, connecting the dots, how do I help a parent kind of connect the dots between all the information that's being presented in order for me to truly understand. And I just, love that idea of being understood, because truly being understood is, I think, what all of us want as, human beings. So I love all those. I could tell you had a thought.
Well, it reminded me of because I printed out some of these slides. I try to do a lot of free workshops too for parents to empower them with the information they need to go into these meetings, especially if they're not in a position where they can hire an advocate. You know, and I list out the red flags for them. You know, don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to not sign. Don't be afraid to audio record. You know, all of these things. Don't be afraid to invite your mom or your sister or your speech therapist, you know, your private insurance funded speech therapist to the meeting so that they can also be eyes and ears for you, because they also might be able to take a step back. But you know what you had said about connecting the dots, it's so true. You know, a lot of times I sit in these meetings and I think, oh my gosh, okay, so they have shown, or they have presented their assessment findings to parents, and parents, T-scores and normed, forget all about all of that, but they have actually cherry-picked data to make a case for why a child needs or does not need a certain goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as we know, you know, assessments then lead to present levels and baseline. And if your assessments are inaccurate, then your present levels and baseline are inaccurate. And so then how are you going to develop goals from that? And even if they are really accurate, are they actually aligned with the goal? And then if they are, how is the goal being measured? How is it relevant? Is it appropriately ambitious and achievable? I mean, there are just so many opportunities for things to fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
And then of course the big ticket item, which is services and supports, and then how they interpret what is most intrusive. You know, I love that it's a common thing for you know, school teams to say, you don't want an aid. That's more restrictive. Well, not according to IDEA. Actually, if the aid is being provided in a general ed setting. So you need to bring to light the interpretation and point out their flawed rationale.
Yeah. And that's a very specific skill set, Kristen. You know, understanding the law, understanding rights, and how that actually gets translated in real time to present levels, to goals, and then to services. And for parents, you know, it's how do services and supports get determined? Well, it's based on those goals. Mm-hmm. It's driven by goals. Well, if those goals then aren't, you know, kind of based on a reliable or valid foundation of present levels, which can be also, you know, exposed, I guess, or evaluated through assessments, then you're right. It's going to look really wonky, you know. I imagine that your training as a behaviorist helps with goal writing.
Yes. Honestly, it is the best thing to take that information and apply it. Not just, I mean, I will say it helps with the actual writing of SMART goals, right? If SMART goals is a whole workshop in and of itself that parents can attend to make sure that they are specific and relevant and measurable and accurate and appropriate. But not only that, you know, it's funny, I was just attending an IEP today, and I was saying to the team, I didn't say you are overcomplicating. I say, we're overcomplicating things, aren't we? You know, like, let's simplify this. My job is really to make it easier on the team to implement these goals, to take the data, to share the data, to make those that, you know, informed choices. But, you know, it's like they really overcomplicate things by saying they're going to do things a certain percentage of times in all of these different opportunities. You know, let's just stick with the basics here. Let's just measure frequency, or let's just measure accuracy. But they layer on these measurements. So my hope is that the teams are then grateful for my feedback too. You know, I'm not there to just battle them. And I think I want parents to understand a good advocate doesn't go into a meeting pounding their fists on the table. A good advocate brings everyone together, collaborates, honors what is working, you know, reinforcement. That's another really great skill that I've learned as a behavior analyst. You have to provide praise to the people who are working really hard, and you have to find your allies in those meetings. If I have a teacher who is speaking the truth, I'm going to align myself with that teacher, and I'm going to build her up or him up, and we're going to fight this together. You know, it's really, it's about that. It's about building relationships. It's about building rapport and trust with the team members who get it. And there are team members who do get it.
Agreed. And I think, we know that most of the time, most people have the best intentions. Mm-hmm. The intentions are there. And, I love this idea of collaboration and building allies and relationships, because this family is going to have to do an IEP at the minimum once a year.
Yes.
Right? You and I both know there can be addendums and changes, and that can lead to more IEPs, but at minimum once a year. Mm-hmm. So you're going to be coming back theoretically to these same people, at least at the administrative level, or at some of the service provision levels. When is it appropriate to burn a bridge in that situation, which can happen in these situations? And that's really hard, especially when you are coming back to the table year after year. So it is a tricky balance of balancing rights, of balancing needs, of balancing who this student is at this time, because that changes. Thank goodness it does, because hopefully they're growing and developing and maturing. Something you said that was so interesting. I just realized, here we are empowering parents to be advocates for their own child, because inevitably that's part of their role as a parent, period, full stop, right? And you had just shared how challenging it was even for you to advocate for your stepson.
Oh, I mean, I would be shaking in the meeting, just losing my mind at the ridiculousness of it all. And granted, every team, every school district is different, but yeah, I had to call upon my people to give me that support. Thank goodness I have a bunch of people I can ask.
Yeah. I mean, it's highlighting that this is challenging. Yeah. It's hard,
Listen, they didn't make this book for no reason, From Emotions to Advocacy, because it is emotional. And I do highly recommend this book. You can get it on Rights Law. It's a must read for parents who want, number one, to be validated, all through this book. This is overwhelming. This is so intense. I mean, look at this. This is the printout of the special education rights and responsibilities from the the California Department of Education. This is just California. So no parent is going to go into an IEP with that memorized, Yeah. And if they can print it out and refer to it, great. But even that is a challenge. So.
Yeah. And that's very heady, intellectual kind of information, which when emotions get sparked up and are going, crazy, if you will, when emotions are big, we don't have access to that part of our brain. And so just kind of the importance of getting support, even, getting the right support and getting the support you need when you need it is such a big thing. Hey, Kristen, could you help us understand the difference between an advocate and an attorney?
Yes. So obviously an attorney goes to law school. They have a much deeper knowledge of law in general. An advocate has a working knowledge of education law, IDEA on the federal level. And there's another big book for that too, right? and then whatever state you're in, there are improvements made on that law. So a state can't be more restrictive in their interpretation of IDEA. They can actually allow for more rights, which is great. In California, actually is a partial consent state, which is a really huge asset, as it favors the rights of the child and the parent, meaning that a parent can partially agree to an IEP, and the IEP can be implemented based on what the parent does agree to. In other states, it's all or nothing. So that's kind of intense, right? Because now you're having to meet and negotiate on every single point until you are left with a document that you are 100% in agreement with. So, here we can say, yes, I agree with everything, except I do not agree with your decision to cut my speech services in half. Therefore, I'm invoking my right to stay put. Great. Now, at that point, the school district can file for due process, or otherwise propose some other dispute resolution, but they're usually not doing that if it's just you're disagreeing this one time. And I will tell you, after COVID, we're not cutting anything. Right? It is not the time to be making decisions about cutting services after a year and a half of educational loss.
Yeah.
So anyway, I know your question was related to something else. Okay, so then an advocate, the way I see it, so I do a records review. Don't tell anyone. I do it for free. Just kidding. That was a wink. And the reason I do, and some people would say that's ridiculous, but that's because when I do a records review, I want to know, am I the right person for this job? Sometimes I'm not. I'm looking at it going, oh boy, you need a lawyer. How do I know that you need a lawyer? Because there are a number of procedural and probably substantive violations that require a lawyer to go back in time for up to 2 years, that's the statute of limitations, to then negotiate remedies for the district's egregious mistakes. And so that means you will have to go through due process to get compensatory education and all of that. That is something that is out of my ability. I mean, it is beyond what I can do. Advocates cannot no longer represent a family in due process. They used to a while back, but they cannot now, though there are some things being done, I think, to allow for that. I don't have the specifics on it, but because I think special education law is just being completely inundated right now, that they're like, gosh, we need more hands on deck. And so I think they're looking at allowing some advocates to be involved in that process. Other states do allow it, but not California. With the regional center, an advocate can go to fair hearing, though, just so you know. But I honestly, I wouldn't feel comfortable really doing that. I have my limits. An advocate, though, will clean up an IEP so that moving forward, it's in good shape. An advocate can attend an IEP and ask questions for the record. If a family is planning on going to an attorney, a lot of times I will start the family off by making requests on record and then pass the case on to an attorney. Okay, so there are cases where I have been able to get some compensatory education. I have gone through informal dispute resolution and an alternative dispute resolution with families, but the big message here is, if in those cases you are presented with a settlement agreement. Now, it's really important for a family at that point to involve an attorney to make sure that they're not waiving their rights. So usually with a settlement agreement, the district is writing in something that says, by signing this agreement, you are waiving your right to file any claims in the past 2 years. So you got to make sure everything you have a problem with is in there. An attorney is going to be much more successful with negotiating a settlement agreement. I have consulted with attorneys myself on them, but I always warn parents, This is not my thing. You need a level of expertise that is beyond me. Okay.
Yeah.
So for advocates, fees are not reimbursable. Attorneys' fees can be reimbursable in the settlement process, but not their attendance at an IEP. That's one thing. Advocates are more affordable, though. So if you're not going to get your fees reimbursed, and, you know, I mean, I really feel like if you can, it's never my opinion. Sorry, attorneys out there. It's not my advice, though. Typically, if you have a 3-year-old, there are no violations in the past 2 years, right? I do not advise families to show up to their initial IEP with an attorney. It creates a really anxious environment. Now the district has to have their attorney at that IEP, and then it's just the attorneys talking to each other. You know, there's really no reason to do that. Probably some exceptions, but you know, you can start off with an advocate and create a very warm and collaborative atmosphere. Typically, but things get very serious when you invite an attorney. So, you know, there's that to consider.
Mm-hmm. And in some situations where that application may be okay.
For sure.
Yeah. I mean, again, it really goes back to this kind of informed choice. You know, for someone, and maybe even for the structure or the framework, for a parent to have someone that can provide a structure or a framework for which to understand how to navigate, measure, balance, pros, cons, these types of things. Mm-hmm. And, you know, again, going back to that 3-year-old, parents have never been in an IEP, or if it's their first child anyway, have never been in an IEP before. So that's so important. I love those differences. I mean, like, I definitely learned something there. And that what we need to do, Kristen, is like, we just need to, you did so many like great highlights. It was like, oh, okay. Oh, we're a partial consent state. Oh yeah, we can't represent families in due process, but we can in fair hearing. I mean, like, so, you know, again, though, but these are the intricacies of the law that in California, anyway, that you understand and can navigate around and help parents understand that as well. That's awesome. I know you love to empower parents, Kristen, and if you could leave parents with, you know, one of the things, or maybe a skill that you would love all your parents to learn how to do, even, you know, with you or without you, what would that be? What skill would that be for a parent?
Yeah, I think there's so many, but if I had to choose one, I would say when a school district says no, how are you going to respond? Because I will be honest with you, there are hills not worth dying on. You know, it's a negotiating process like any other. But when a school says, no, I'm sorry, we can't do that, I would love for parents to follow up with questions. And a popular question for me is that policy or procedure? Because if it's policy, then you can ask to see it in writing. And if it's procedure, then that's just something that they've decided to do willy-nilly, and you can disagree with that. You know, you can say, well, that's not really, then we need to meet halfway, or we need to discuss that further. We need to understand why you're just declining this. And that might then lead to, further meetings, maybe even filing a complaint with the California Department of Education, which, by the way, anybody can do. You don't have to be an attorney. You don't have to be an advocate. You can be a parent and file your own complaint. So, and then you can get remedies through that process too. So, but yeah, I always want parents to not take no for an answer, because districts don't like when I say that they're often saying no, that they're in the business of saying no until they are pressured to say yes. And they don't like when I say that they're in the business of waiting for a child to fail, which they are, because And parents have a hard time understanding this point because they're like, but why wouldn't they just do what's best for my child? Well, because the law says they don't have to do what's best. They have to do what's appropriate. And if your child has not failed, then you can't really make a case for why your child needs a one-to-one aide full-time at school, for example. You know, there really needs to be demonstrated need for that. And the scariest thing is, I feel like for parents, is going from preschool to kindergarten, knowing, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to wait for my kid to fail before I get the services in place. And I agree. It is terrifying.
Yeah.
But yes, my biggest piece of advice would be pause and ask that follow-up question, just for a deeper understanding and to hold them accountable for the things that are coming out of their mouths.
Yeah.
Because they will say no. I tell you what, though, they are less likely to say no when there is an advocate and or when you are audio recording. At least without providing a rationale. You know what I mean? Like, they're not as flippant about saying no to things. Like, at least they'll pause and think about it, going, oh, wait, there's an advocate here, or, oh, I'm on the record.
Yeah. No, I love that. That's a great skill. For actually life, right?
Yeah, exactly.
When you hear the word no, when you get the feeling of no, how do you understand it? Like, just how do you understand that? Even if that might not change the outcome, at least you just didn't brush it away and not understand why that happened. I love that. Oh my gosh. Well, you know, Kristen, you and I could talk forever. But if someone's listening to this and they're like, you know what, I actually would like the help of an advocate. I want to reach out to Kristen. What's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Sure. There's, I have a website. My company is called South Bay Child Advocates. So the website is the full name, southbaychildadvocates.com. There's an online inquiry form on there. And that's the best way. That way I can at least gather some preliminary information. It's busy times right now. Everybody is coming off of COVID with a lot of questions. So I'll do my best. But yeah, I do free consultation, and I do review records, and then I provide my feedback to ensure that they truly want to work with me, that we can build that rapport, and that we're on the same page about what their child needs.
I love it. You're the best. Thank you so much, Kristen, for being here today.
Thank you, Gwen. I really had fun.
Me too.